Good evening. Nice to see you all. Hopefully you can hear me clearly with this microphone. I do have one, so we can adjust the volumes if necessary. But is that clear enough? Yep. So welcome. And of course, you will know this is the final night of the Michael Hill International Violin Competition. And this is the 7th competition, so tonight we'll be choosing the 7th winner for this competition. My name is Justine Cormack, and I'm the violinist of NZ Trio, and I was the judge for the first 4 competitions. Initially, I was involved through my association with the competition as concertmaster of the Auckland Philharmonia, and since I left that role as an association with NZ Trio. So as many of you will know, because you've been to Queenstown and been through the whole process, I've been presenting these talks, Insider's Guide, throughout the whole competition with the idea to give you more insight into how the competition runs and what the judges might be looking for, and giving you an opportunity to ask any questions you might have about any aspect of the competition. So hopefully I can get through my material in time to have at least 5 minutes of questions at the end. So if you do have any questions as we're going along, just keep them in mind. So tonight is the final step of a process that actually started in December last year, when we received 130 tapes from 27 different countries, and all of these tapes are from violinists who are, I'm sort of attacking this microphone a bit here, violinists between the age of 18 and 28. Is that me making that sound? Maybe talking a little bit too aggressively. There were 5 judges from Australasia, including myself, and we listened to 130 tapes and chose 18 semi-finalists. So these 18 arrived in the country about 10 days ago, and we had 3 days of semi-finals down in Queenstown over Queen's birthday weekend, and all 18 performed both rounds. So at the end of that round, the judges had a really broad concept or idea of each competitor, and from the variety of repertoire that they performed. And they voted to progress 6 to a chamber music round, which happened on Wednesday and Thursday here in Auckland. And then at the end of that, the judges chose 3, which you'll be hearing tonight. And the 3 are, the first person you will hear tonight is Bo Sun Mo. He's the second one there, and he's playing the Prokofiev Concerto No. 2. And then Nikki Choi will be playing the Sibelius Concerto. He's the first one here. Both of them are from Canada. And Sarah Christian is from Germany, is playing the Brahms Concerto. So there are 7 judges in these semi-final rounds in Queenstown and here tonight, and they are a fabulous panel. I've had the opportunity to spend time with them and also attend some of their masterclasses in the last couple of days, and they're really wonderful musicians, violinists of their own right. We've got Christian Altenberger from Austria, James Ennis from Canada, and many of you may have heard him play with the APO 2 weeks, it was just last week. Ning Feng, who is from China and won this competition in 2005, so it's wonderful to have him back. Ida Kavavian from the USA, and she's very well known as the violinist of Beaux-Arts Trio. Dean Olding from Australia, who is also the artistic advisor for the competition. Helena Pohl is the New Zealand representative this year. She's the first violinist of the New Zealand String Quartet. And Dmitry Sitkovetsky from London. These are all very famous names, and it's really wonderful to have them all here with us in New Zealand. So very briefly, the judging procedure, the judges are not allowed to talk about any of the contestants between themselves. So they're not allowed to have any discussions. And the decisions are made by secret ballot. And the way the process works, it is outlined more in detail in your program books. But for a candidate to progress, they need to have a majority vote. And so tonight, the voting process tonight will be quite straightforward, as there are only 3 competitors. But down in Queenstown, it was quite an extensive voting process to get the 6 to continue. So these 3 concertos really are spectacular works. We're in for a real treat with these works. They're 3 of my favourite violin concertos. And to this point, the judges have seen the competitors play solo with their solo Bach and Paganini caprices, and also a New Zealand solo work that was written especially for this competition by Jack Boddy. They've seen the competitors play in a duo with piano, and then the 6 that played in the chamber music round, they've seen them on stage with 2 other musicians. All of those different scenarios require a different element from the violinists. And of course, tonight, they get to hear them in the concerto setting. So a much bigger hall, the soloist up the front with a full orchestra behind them. So this is a chance for the judges to see a different part or a different persona from the 3 finalists. They will require a different sort of charisma to really carry off the performance on stage in a venue like this. The projection of their sound will be even more important. You may be interested to know, I'm not going to tell you what they are, but they are all playing fine instruments tonight. So that sort of element can really help in terms of the projection as well. And they really require a different sort of conviction in their playing. So the judges will be looking for these different elements that are required from a soloist playing concerto. In my previous sessions, I've outlined the challenges of those various aspects of solo and duo and chamber music. But tonight I obviously can talk a little bit more about the concerto challenges. So, more obviously, they have to work with a conductor and an orchestra. So there's a 3-way relationship there, which is very different from the likes of the chamber music round 2 nights ago. It's really important for the soloist and the conductor to develop a rapport. And to a certain extent also, the orchestra needs to develop a rapport with the soloist. And I was talking to Dean Olding, one of the judges this afternoon. He's the concert master of the Sydney Symphony, and he was mentioning how it'll be interesting to see how the orchestra responds to each of the soloists as well. So one of the challenges, well, the biggest challenge really, is that the soloist has to lead the performance. It is very much so their concept of the work which we will be receiving tonight. And that's pretty much always the case, but even more so in a competition where the conductor will be really trying to support the artistic vision of each of the soloists. And one of the challenges, though, is to be able to for the soloist to present that concept, but at the same time to know when they have to yield or respond differently to the orchestra. It's certainly, an orchestra is a little bit like driving a ship in that it can only adjust so fast, whereas so far the competitors have performed with either a pianist or chamber musicians who are really, there's an agility to the way that they can respond. And that's not to say that an orchestra can't be agile, but it's a different sort of relationship. And so it's very important that each competitor completely understands the whole orchestral score. So, and yeah, there's many different parts, many different instruments, to know when they need to listen to certain instruments and how their parts respond and interact. Obviously, the conductor is also very aware of this and will be helping, but it is a complicated kind of 3-way triangle that goes in all different directions. So in preparation for this performance tonight, each competitor would have had 1 hour with the conductor and a pianist. So Sarah Watkins, who was playing in Christchurch would have played through their concertos with them for the conductor to hear what they want to do with the music. So in basic terms, they're looking at the tempo and how they want to characterize their concept, and the overall pacing of the work. So the conductor's really looking for the sorts of things that might be an issue between the orchestra and the soloist, and to get a bit of preparation for how they're going to put it together, because they only have 90 minutes. They had a 90-minute rehearsal, each of the soloists with the orchestra, and that was yesterday. So both the piano rehearsal and the orchestra rehearsal happened yesterday. And so it is a very limited time, but this is also very normal. That's usually what happens. The soloist flies in the day before the concert and usually rehearses with the orchestra in the final rehearsal. And so it needs to be it's a really quick sort of setting up of the parameters and the rapport, which is one of the hardest things about playing a concerto, because you don't have that time to really develop the sort of rapport that you could if you had more rehearsals. It's the nature of the job. So this is a very good test of how these competitors can fit into that very normal professional setting. So in that rehearsal, they would have been playing through the orchestra to get a sense of how the soloist is going to play the work. These are 3 well-known concertos, so that the orchestra will know how they generally fit together. That being said, every soloist has a different interpretation. So the orchestra and the conductor and the soloist are getting to know each other in that time. They'll be working on balance between the soloist and the orchestra, depending on how the soloist wants to play various aspects, and just listening and reacting, a normal kind of rehearsal setting, really. Now, the judges don't see these rehearsals, so they only get to hear the performance tonight, and they will be looking to see what sort of rapport, how sophisticated the rapport is between the soloist and the conductor and the orchestra. Without a doubt, this repertoire demands the ultimate in virtuosity from each of the competitors, but also it's the ultimate test of musicianship. They're incredibly brilliant and virtuosic works, but they all require a really elegiac lyricism, and these works are sort of the peak of the violin repertoire. So we really are in for a treat with the concertos that the competitors have chosen. I think it really will be a test of their maturity tonight. So to go into a little bit more detail of what the judges might be looking for, all week I've been presenting my thoughts about what they're likely to be looking for. Each judge, to a certain extent, has their own set of parameters. What pleases one may not please another, and they will all say that themselves, but in the end it'll be a majority vote that decides the winners. But in the last 2 days, as I mentioned before, I had the chance to attend masterclasses with 4 of the judges, and it was incredibly inspiring for me to see them working actually with a lot of the competitors that did not progress. So I was able to see and hear about the things that were very important to each one of those judges, and it very much did reflect the sorts of things I have been telling people, so I was quite relieved about that. But without a doubt, they were all talking about how important it is to really serve the music. So it's not necessarily about glorifying yourself or your own playing. It's about using your techniques and your musicianship to get the music across. Ida Kavavian held up the score of Solo Bach and said, "This is what you have to get out to the audience. This music is what they need to receive." That being said, it's really important. They're also looking for the very personal performances. So again, Ida talked about playing from the heart, in that you, as an audience member, you really want to feel their personal perspective of this music, still being true to the music, but really bringing something unique and special. So in the masterclasses, they were very much working with the participants to unlock their own expression. Without a doubt, they all need to have great technical facility. In order to express their musicianship, they need to be completely free on their instruments, and that really goes without saying. But technique's not more important than musicianship, and musicianship's not more important than technique. Those two things have to come together. All of the judges talked about the setup of the players, how they were using their body. They really want to see a natural use of their body and a very comfortable kind of relationship with the instrument and the bow. And the reason being that this really influences the performance and their ability to express themselves. Another thing that came up was an awareness of the architecture of the music. So it's not just being able to play from the beginning to the end gorgeously. It's the shape of the music and the pace of the music from the beginning to the end needs to be really considered. And I mean, all of these judges will have played this music. They certainly have their own idea of how the music would go, but they're not going to expect that somebody plays it the same way as they do. But they will be able to hear if the performers have a concept that takes the listener from one end of the movement to the next, and also from the first note right to the last note, in terms of the power of the expression of the music. And then the main thing that they seemed to be working on with the competitors was the use of their bow. And this is another thing that I went into in more detail in Queenstown. It's often surprising for people to know that really it's the bow that presents all of the expression, almost 99%. The left hand stops the strings, creates the pitch of the note. To a certain extent, there's some expression coming from shifting and vibrato. But besides that, all of the colour, all of the character, all of the articulation comes from the bow and its contact with the string. So it's about that quality of contact that the judges are really looking for, the control of that relationship between the bow and the string. And I've been encouraging people to really pay attention to that place. And we move the bow closer to the bridge, further away. That changes the sound. They're playing with pressure from the bow, from their arm onto the string, and they're playing with bow speed. And those things are consistently changing. And it's the sophistication of that control that really is what brings out the real artistry in each of the violinists. So I'm sure that the judges will be really paying a lot of attention to what's happening there. Now, I think I've pretty much covered the sorts of things I wanted to draw your attention to. A question that people have been asking me, how much does stage presence, what they're wearing, things like that, how much does that come into it? Without a doubt, it does come into it. There are many, many aspects, and live performance involves people watching. So it's really important that the competitors consider how they look. That's not to say they shouldn't completely be themselves, because it's not about artifice, it's absolutely about their own personal integrity. But the whole performance, every aspect, how they walk on stage, all of those things really do come into it. And I think that's about it, which pretty much means that I can answer some questions now. One of my favourite things to say in these talks, in the front cover of the program books, we have the 6 past winners of this competition. And I think they really epitomise the type of person that we're looking for in this competition for our winners, and that they are all incredibly engaging musicians. Quite clearly they can play their violins incredibly, but it's the music that they are able to share with us which makes them very special. And every one of these winners also, it's very clear, it will have been very clear to the judges that they had a wonderful career ahead of themselves. So as well as looking for really mature musicians, they want to see, and throughout the whole competition with all the various aspects that the competitors show, the judges want to have absolute confidence that the winner is going to have a fabulous career. And I am absolutely confident that we've got three people tonight who have the potential to do that. So we really are in for an incredible treat. So I can take any questions you might have now on about anything. Yes? Mendelssohn, okay. Yeah, so the question was why, there were 6 chamber music finalists, and there were 4 works that they could choose, and this year, for some reason, in that semi-final round, we had 5 Mendelssohns and 1 Ravel. This is the first time that's happened each year. Sometimes you might have 2 or maybe 3 of the same piece. And the question was why that would be. To a certain extent, it's just fluke, except that I think 13 of the 18 had decided to play Mendelssohn. And we've been talking about this. It could well be that most likely the Mendelssohn in some ways is easier to put together fast. Like the Ravel is a much more complicated piece. There's many tempo changes. Yet somebody chose to play that, and they're through to this final as well. It could be to do with the fact that maybe most of them had played the Mendelssohn before and not played some of the other works, but it's hard to know. But I think probably it's to do with the fact that it's possibly a more straightforward work to put together. It's not to say it's easier. But yes. They have been all sitting together in the concert chamber. It was about halfway back, and in Queenstown the same. And I'm not actually sure whether they're going to be sitting. Are they sitting? Do you know, Michael? In the first tier, not up the top. First tier, yeah. So they'll have the prime seats in the house tonight, but so they do all sit together. Yeah. Must have some more questions. Yes. No, actually, I meant to point that out. The judges will be considering everything they've heard from these candidates. So unless you were at Queenstown and heard every note, you're at somewhat of a disadvantage to the judges. So they really will be considering all those aspects. It's really important for the winner of this competition to have that versatility. If you have a look at the judges' bios in this program book, you'll see that they all have lots of different strings to their bow, really, in terms of what they play, the concertos. They're all active chamber musicians. So that aspect is very important for a professional violinist these days. Yes? Bosun played the Ravel. The second one up here. Yeah. It's a fabulous piece, the Ravel piano trio. Yes? Okay, yes, the order of the playing, up until this point, the order has been decided by a draw that happened in Queenstown the day before the competition started. It was slightly complicated in that there are 2 pianists, so they had a bucket of names with Sarah Watkins' competitors and a bucket with Deirdre Irons, and they took one from each bucket. So that presented an order for the 18, And then when we moved to the chamber music round, they stayed in that order in terms of their order within the 18. So Nicky played first because he was number 5, and then I'm going to forget the numbers, but yeah, so they played in that order. But tonight is different, and this has always been the case. When we get to the final, it's more often to do with the programming and the length of the works. Tonight, the Brahms is the longest work, so it makes sense to have that in the second half. And it's also partly to do with the conditions for the orchestra in terms of their call time, and so there are lots of factors that come into it. Yeah. Yes? Three different. Yeah, I'm not going to know the difference in time between those concertos. The Prokofiev and Sibelius are probably closer to 30 minutes or a bit under. I hope I'm not wrong. The Brahms is closer to 40 minutes, I think.
So the other two competitors, don't you see one on stage?
Once they have played, or even, no, they're most welcome to. They probably won't want to, especially if they still have yet to play. But no, they're able to listen if they want to, I presume. Yeah. It's an interesting question. Yes? Yeah, right. So the question is what sort of experience they will have had with orchestras. And I would have to ask each player, but I would assume that they all have had some concerto experience. I'm sure they would have also played in the orchestra for concerto, for other people playing. So they have an understanding of it. But it's quite possible that they're playing this concerto with orchestra for the first time tonight. I'm sorry, I can't be more specific. Yeah. More? Must be more. Yes? Yes? Okay, so the standard of the competition. That's another question that people do ask. I would say that right from the start, the standard of our winners has been consistent. We've had really fabulous winners, with the competition being more and more recognised, and it really is recognised as one of the great violin competitions in the world now, and all violinists around the world know about it. I would say that just the quality of all the semi-finalists has got the depth of the quality has improved. So it's a harder job to pick the semi-finalists and the chamber music finalists and the concerto finalists from that group of 18 with each year that goes by. Yes. Okay, so the question is, what's it like for the judges to hear 2 romantic concertos versus a modern? And this is an issue that you come up against all the time in the various rounds of the competition, in that it is, well, for example, in the chamber music round where we had 5 Mendelssohns and 1 Ravel, it's how do you compare those performances? And I mean, I would say that's where the knowledge and experience of the judges really comes in. They do understand the difficulties of the various styles and so on, and possibly the unifying element that comes out in the end there is really to do with the conviction of the performance, which rides above those differences. But the judges know this music intimately, so what an audience in general might really respond to in terms of the repertoire, the judges may have a different kind of response. So the voting system is more clearly outlined in here, and I hope that I can give you a brief synopsis that makes sense. But they use a transferable vote system. So in order for in the previous rounds for a competitor to continue, they had to keep voting until one competitor had a majority. Then that competitor would go on, and then they'd start re-voting for the next one to progress. And it is quite a complicated system where if you don't have a majority, then you have to vote between the candidates with the smaller numbers in order to have smaller numbers of candidates to vote so that you can get a majority. It is quite complicated. I've been through it 4 times and it works really well. But in that earlier round, it means you have to do a lot of voting. And this, sorry? No, you can't have a draw because there are 7 judges. So the only situation that gets a little bit complicated is if you had 7 judges voting for 7 different people. But they had a way to get around that, but it hasn't happened, and it would be pretty rare. So the question was whether each round is similarly weighted or if more is given to the concerto. And actually that's where each individual judge will have their own perspective. One judge may feel that the concerto round is supremely important. Another might think, something else. So the judges are not given any criteria by which to judge. They don't have to mark, or they just do their own assessment. And obviously the quality of the judges comes into who's invited to come here. And I think we've had an incredible run of judges, and without a doubt it's been an important aspect of the competition to invite judges that have a really fine reputation and also that don't bring any political baggage with them. Some competitions are known to be highly political, and this competition has worked very hard to not be political, and very much it's about how the performers are presenting themselves. And again, I just draw your attention to the winners that we've had, and I think they really speak for the wonderful competition that we have. Yes? The question is whether the competitors might change their instrument for tonight. I think it would, it's not impossible that people would. I know they haven't for this competition. Quite a few competitors will have been given violins to bring for this competition, to play in the competition, and when they return home they might have to hand the instrument back. So that's quite common. I'm sure you're all aware that fine violins cost a lot of money these days, and so the competitors are very lucky if they're given an instrument to bring for the competition. So yes, they would use the same one all the way through, but there's nothing to stop them. I mean, a competitor could say, "Here, play this," but that would bring all sorts of unknowns to the picture. So you could be disadvantaging yourself big time to do that. Yeah, one more. Yes. Okay. So the question is it harder for a smaller person to project on the violin? Not necessarily. It's all to do with how you set yourself up and how you use your body. You could be really big and tense and not be able to produce a gorgeous sound. You can be very small, and if you're using your weight, and it's to do with the technique. So I would say that it shouldn't. I mean, we've had finalists before, tiny little Asian girl who produced a massive sound. So yeah, that's one of the elements that is a variable between each player, but the size shouldn't be a disadvantage or an advantage. Yeah. So I think we have to stop, I'm afraid. I will be around though, so if you have any questions, please do feel free to come and ask me, and enjoy this wonderful competition. You're definitely in for a treat. Thanks.